everybody, Joey, recovery guy, back again. Today, as you can see, we're going to be doing higher power. And it's a big subject. It's the whole reason why 12-step fellowships work. I'm the recovery guy. I'm not the 12-step recovery guy. So I'm super down with all different kind of recovery modalities, but I think lots of recovery modalities have higher power in them. Like I know DBT has a higher power component, AA definitely has a higher power component, and I'm a huge fan of it. And why I am is because it works. I know it works through personal experience, and I work at a 12-step based treatment center as well that also helps a bunch of people with this way. I'm going to try and cover as much of this stuff as I can. It's obviously a complicated topic. When we talk about higher power, often we get into discussing like organized religion and the Catholic Church and kind of all the things, and then we get into science. Is it even real? There's no proof, all the things, right? And this is why I've written down the reasons. These are like the top 8 most common reasons why people do not believe in a higher power. And what I want to do is, it's not that I intend to prove to you guys that a higher power is real, not that I could. It's not that I directly communicate with the Almighty and I want to carry the good message to you, nothing like that. I'm just saying, like, if this is the stuff that's holding you back from getting involved in a 12-step fellowship, I think that it doesn't need to hold you back from getting involved in a 12-step fellowship. So we're going to go into higher power, what it is, what it isn't, possible conceptions. In a 12-step model, it becomes only a simple matter of being willing to believe in a power greater than yourself. It doesn't mean you have to believe in it. And I know that, actually, you know what? That makes me think of something. One sec. I'm going to write down number 9, and I know it's going to be a different color, and this is probably going to piss a lot of people off, but I'm going to say no results as well. Lots of people do try their hand at prayer and meditation reluctantly, and they don't kind of experience immediate results. So they're like, okay, well, these people told me that if I prayed and meditate, a bunch of cool would happen to me, and none of it's happened. This whole thing isn't real. I'm leaving the treatment center. I'm going straight to the downtown east side. I'm buying some fentanyl, and I'm going to overdose, okay? I know it's not fun to joke about those kind of things, but that's kind of the reality of the situation that we're dealing with, okay? So it's only a matter of being willing to believe in a power greater than yourself. It's not full belief, because the only way you're actually going to believe in a higher power yourself fully is if you've experienced it yourself. It's not just something that someone can tell you is real and you have this full faith, full trust, full belief. It's a process. You have to do the work to convince yourself to your own satisfaction whether there is a higher power or not. And again, once you tap into this thing, once you understand it, once you personalize a relationship with it, you'll never go back. It'll be the best thing you've ever done with your life. I promise you, it will completely revolutionize the way you see everything. It's just like you were unplugged from the matrix and an entirely different worldview set in, far happier, far more magical, full of meaning, full of purpose, full of go juice. You're going to be sponsoring everyone. You're going to be preaching the good word yourself in your own special way. Don't get weird about it. It pisses people off. So we're going to get into it, and I'm going to do my best to not drone on. I mean, I could probably spend about 4 days on all this stuff, but we're going to spend anywhere from 20 to 40 minutes going over all this. So I kind of do got to keep it rolling a little bit here. So, okay, why don't people believe in a higher power? Especially, people come to the treatment center that I work, and they pay thousands and thousands of dollars a month to be at a place like this. And there's a huge wait list, and sometimes people can't get in quick enough, and they're like, desperate to get some help. I want to stop drinking. I want to improve my mental health. I don't want to feel like this anymore. I want to live a happy, peaceful, contented life. And then they come here for mental health professionals such as myself to instruct and inform on how to get sober and live a better quality of life. And we're like, oh, you got to turn it over. Well, it's a step 3 problem, bro. You just have to turn your will and your life over to the power, and we kind of pass the buck to a higher power. Most people don't even believe in a higher power anyways. So it's kind of it's almost a slap in the face. And I do spend a lot of time trying to demystify this idea of a higher power and trying to put it in more practical terms. It doesn't have to be magical. It doesn't have to be, all woo-woo and weird. But anyways, let's get into it. So one of the reasons why people have a hard time with this idea is because obviously you can't see, touch, or hear a higher power. It's not something that's tangible, and that's a big problem for people. You know, we are physical entities, we are physical beings, we are embodied, and we kind of seeing is believing type thing. And it's not very hard to get around this one. I mean, there's lots of things that we cannot directly see, touch, or hear, but we do believe in it. And now, when I ask the group, the average person will say something like, "Oh, love, like you can't touch love or see it, but you can feel it," and that's an okay one. The feeling you have for your child, that's a good one. You can't really see that directly. You can see someone staring at their children fondly, but you can't see the love, if you will. But, you know, that one's not great. It's not going to convince non-believers because there's certain neuropeptides and certain neurotransmitters and hormones that are correlated to the feeling of love. So you will have a bunch of people in a test, they will all say they're currently experiencing love. You can measure their hormones level, measure their neurotransmitters, and then you can be like, oh, love is like this much dopamine mixed with this much serotonin mixed with this certain flood of oxytocin, vasopressin, a little bit of GABA here, a little bit of GABA there, and there you go, boom, there's love. That's what the nerds will say, okay? The neuroscientists, the losers, okay? Not that neuroscientists are losers, but they're kind of losers. One of the things that I like to use as an example is potential. People have potential. I am who I am now, but I have the potential to become something greater than I am now, or worse. And the fact that I have a potential, many different potentials, unfulfilled, and I can consciously choose between them and act in a way that realizes the potential, that's not something that you can see. But everyone knows potential is real, and I know that each and every one of you guys has the power and the potential to get sober. That's a future that exists in a certain sense that you can then do things to actualize that future. You can't see potential, you can't taste potential, you can't hear it. It doesn't really exist. It's not made of material. It's not empirical data. It's not science. Okay. Another one, and this is probably the biggest banger, so I'll just get right to the biggest banger right away because we got to keep a move on here, is consciousness itself. Consciousness is the host of all experience. All sound occurs in your conscious awareness. All smell occurs in your conscious awareness. Everything that you will ever be able to experience occurs within your conscious awareness, yet we don't know what it is. The nature of consciousness is known as the hard problem of consciousness in biology. Nobody knows what it is. Nobody knows where it came from. Nobody quite knows what animals have it in what degrees, but we know humans have an incredible conscious bandwidth, and we can host a tremendous amount of understanding and experience within it. You can't see it, you can't smell it, you can't touch it, you can't taste it, but without consciousness, sight, smell, touch, sound would not even exist. Okay? So that's not necessarily a good reason not to believe in higher power. Okay? Now, this one, next one, obviously gets a little bit heavy. The hypocrisy piece, okay? And so what I'm specifically referring to in relation to higher power is religious hypocrisy. We all know that there's a lot of people in positions of power in religious institutions that do very, very nasty things to people. And most notably, that kind of reaches ahead at the Catholic Church and the treatment of children, alleged treatment of children within the Catholic Church. And that's enough. That one example alone is enough to infuriate people and completely reject this idea of a higher power altogether. Now, I like to separate the idea of a higher power from religion entirely, just because they're separate things, and to conflate them, to subscribe to the idea that there's a higher power that's real does not necessarily mean you have to subscribe to any kind of organized religion. It's a power of your own conception, right? I think that all different religions, all different philosophies, like ancient Greek philosophies, your Buddhism, everybody has, even the Satanists that are like out nowadays, which is super weird because the tenets of Satanism, I don't know if you guys have seen that, it's basically just like be a good guy. And it's like, I don't know how you can turn Satanism into being a good guy. That's a bit of a stretch. Satanism means you're nice to people. That's a bit weird. You can kind of make up your own definition, but all those people that say that, they're kind of stupid. I'm just going to say it out loud. I don't want to be cheeky about this issue, and I don't want to be dismissive about this issue, and I don't want to pretend like I don't care about it or that it's not important and it doesn't mean anything. But there's some things we can say about this whole religious hypocrisy thing. So there's like the Catholic Church, there's, you know, your Bible studies, Sunday school teachers being mean to you, there's the local preacher or priest at your town that is a drunk and lives his life in a way that he wouldn't like to have advertised personally, yet he sits up there every Sunday and try and kind of is almost telling people how to be moral. And then when he's confronted on this, he'll be like, well, I'm not telling you to be moral. I'm just kind of saying what God wants from you, so don't hate me. Okay, I'm just a preacher of, you know, whatever. These people will have their excuses. But there's an interesting thing to know when it comes to like hypocrisy like this. When a religious person does something horrible and evil, you know, whether they're actively saying it's because my religion I'm doing this or not. When religious people do horrible, evil things, at least in our culture, for the most part, people use that person as a valid representative of the religion. Meaning if a religious person does something bad, that means religion is bad. And people will generalize it and they will say, all religious people are bad or severely misguided or just plain stupid. That's what the atheists think. But, you know, when a secular person does something bad, secular meaning non-religious, then all of a sudden he's just a bad person. He's just insane. He's just mentally ill. He had shitty parents. He's just a horrible monster. But it's not, people don't attribute that horrible behavior to the fact that he's not religious. So, and maybe you guys can disagree with me on this, but this is generally speaking what I notice. When a religious person does something bad, religion is bad. When a secular person does something bad, secularism is still completely fine, unharmed by the actions of the individual. Now, to just, again, we got to really hit the bangers on this one because we don't have a lot of time to get through all this kind of stuff, is that the most blatant example is right now is the public school system. Okay, so this isn't to say anything about anybody individually, but the amount of child sexual abuse that is happening in the public school system currently in North America and the Western world today dwarfs anything the Catholic Church has been responsible for by at least a factor of 10. And I've even read certain figures, upper ranges times 100. So that's a really weird thing. And this isn't something that I like talking about. I don't want to talk about it. I'm not proud of it. I'm not like, hey, religious people are less shitty than... But what I'm saying is when every single news article is about how horrible the Catholic Church is, you got Joe Rogan podcast talking about how bad the Catholic Church is, you got everyone and their mothers screaming about this hypocrisy and, you know, don't hand your kids over to the church and altar boys or all that kind of stuff. It's like, well, the public school system, especially if you get into extracurricular activities like sports, the amount of child sexual abuse is absolutely blows that anything that the Catholic Church has done by a landslide. And that's horrible. And I'm not trying to, you know, say one thing is better than the other, but what I'm trying to illustrate is the amount of ignorance that is in the mind of the modern person. We are culturally indoctrinated by stories, by media, by selective news, and it's complicated to be alive these days, so we're not studying all these topics. We're not going in, we're not doing our research. We got our 9 to 5, we got to take care of our kids, we got to try and get sober, we need to hit the gym so that we're physically in good shape. Like our lives are so busy and we have so many things to do that people don't get into this kind of stuff. But this kind of inconsistent standard is very indicative of someone who's speaking largely out of emotion and very little to do with objective reality. Okay, so don't let this kind of stuff destroy your ability to adhere to a 12-step recovery program or any other recovery program that involves a higher power. I think holding yourself to an objective moral standard is always a good practice. Always a good practice, whether you're in recovery or not. So this type of stuff needs to be destroyed, okay? Now, very similar to this, I'm gonna skip a couple right now and go to holy wars here. because holy wars is another prime example of this hypocrisy. So if you even read like the big book, Bill will say like the wars and the chicanery that religious dispute had facilitated make me sick. He doubts whether on good balance man has done any good, and he thinks like, well, if I'm gonna believe in this whole God thing, I'll also have to believe in the devil. And since what I've seen from World War II, if there is a God and the devil, then the devil is definitely in charge, right? Holy wars. And in We Agnostics, it'll also say we looked upon this warring worlds, these warring theological systems with inexplicable calamity. How can a supreme being have anything to do with kind of all that kind of stuff? And it's like, I understand. And I host a group, so I stand up in front of people talking and asking questions, thought-provoking all the time. And a part of every one of my group cycles, I will ask this question. Maybe I'll ask you guys and I'll let you answer it for yourselves, and then I will tell you the answer. So, and you could probably already tell where I'm going with this. If you take all the religious wars, and then you take all the secular wars, and then you add the body counts of all those together, which one has a greater body count? What do you guys think? I'm giving you a little pause so that you can answer. Okay? You guys got your answer? I ask my group this all the time, and about 90% of the people, every single time, it's a fresh new group of people every 3 weeks, they always say religious wars. And most of them say it immediately. They're just like, but religious. Sometimes I don't even get done asking the question before people start, getting mad. And it's funny because at a treatment center, especially a male treatment center, you got a bunch of alphas trapped into this little sardine can, and the testosterone's flowing like the rivers of ancient Babylon. And everyone's like, getting all testy with each other. And when I do the higher power group, people tend to get mad. And people tend to raise their voice and they yell and they want to be heard and they're like doing all this stuff. And I understand that because it's religion itself and higher power is a touchy subject. And it's been a subject that has been causing a tremendous amount of conflict for all of human history, right? But I mean, the answer to the question is secular wars in terms of body count beats religious wars by, I don't know, you can look at communism alone has killed 200 million people. And you can argue that they never had atom bombs back in the day, and you can argue that there wasn't as many people alive back in the day. But then, and you would say that would even out the numbers. There's just one. If you drop an atom bomb or there's the hydrogen bomb in the right spot, if you can say that, you could kill millions of people right away. Back in the day, the concentration of people wasn't so high, and so you could say that that would tilt the death count in favor of the religious wars. You could counter that by saying that because religious style thinking was the only type of government and thought process we had, because the scientific method hasn't been discovered yet, or secular governments weren't even a thing at that point. Every single war you could automatically attribute it to religion before that time, and whether it was due to resources or whether it was due to power or whether it was due to just land acquisition, it didn't matter. They would automatically, the numbers would just say it's a religious war because the government was religious. So I mean, we can get into the weeds with it all we want, but the point is the secular wars are far more deadly, they're far more common, and again, it's just one of those misconceptions that most people have, that they have no idea where it came from. Why do you think that? Because it's like, so the bastards. Because it's like, is that your best answer? Have you looked it up? Have you even done a quick Google search? Probably not. And on a lot of these questions, there's no formal knowledge that is going into any of the opinions that cause people to turn away from the thing that very well could save their life and has saved the lives of millions of people. So I'm especially passionate about it, and I like getting into this stuff because I think that it needs to be said. People need to be given a different perspective, and then that kind of changes the way they view things. And that's all I'm trying to do here. Again, I can't prove to you guys higher power is real. I can't force you to believe it, nor can I force you to want to try out this idea. But what I can do is hopefully try and remove some of the barriers that we have to this idea. So there's the whole holy wars thing. And we could segue that into, well, here's a real banger one, no proof. Okay, so there's no proof that God exists at all. And it's like, fuck, they're right. I mean, there's no proof that consciousness is real either. The only proof we have that it exists is our own subjective experience of it, but we all know that that's real. And I mean, consciousness has a lot of parallels to the idea of a higher power, because you can't prove a higher power, you can't prove consciousness. Religious people just say they experience God from within. So do conscious entities. I'm conscious. Where is consciousness located? I don't know. It's just it's like the force. It's everywhere and all through you. But, this one, it's a pretty big banger. Well, first of all, we can attack the idea of proof. What is proof? Okay, so you get science, right? How do you prove something is real in a scientific sense, scientific law? What you do is you have a hypothesis. I think this is true. Okay, well, if that was true, then if I did this, this would happen. Okay, let's design an experiment. I'm going to do this, and if this happens, it confirms my hypothesis. I have evidence. Now, if I can consistently repeat it, controlling all the variables, make sure nothing else accounts for my hypothesis being confirmed, then by the process of elimination, this equals my hypothesis, therefore this has to be true. Again, you consistently repeat it, because in the scientific method it's quite rigorous, and then you get a bunch of nerds, other scientists, that try and disprove your theory. And if they can't disprove it, then that evidence will turn into proof, and then that thing will turn into scientific law. And scientific law for whatever that's worth, because we do know now that scientific law is very open to change, and it is constantly changing. And what is now science used to be unknown, and what is unknown now becomes science. So it's kind of always that eternal going outside of the things that we know and bringing it back into what we do know. And then once we know it, we call it science. So it's like this eternal, so there's the world of facts, and there's the world of values, and they are kind of separate, although there's a lot of overlap, and it's hard to differentiate between the two. But back to my whole science experiment thing, okay? If there was a higher power, and the higher power wants you to theoretically be nice to people, not be a dick, help your fellow man, do the things that you need to do to make sure that you're healthy, in mind, body, and spirit, so that you can feel good, and then you don't have to treat other people horribly, and you can go to work properly, and you don't have to piss off your boss, you don't have to piss off your girlfriend, you're not fighting with everybody. You need to do the things for yourself in order so that you can conduct yourself appropriately. God wants this for us so that I can now treat my fellow man appropriately. Theoretically, if there was a God that wanted me to be good and moral and pure, and if I did, he would reward me, well, how do we perform that experiment? Okay, I'm going to act as if this guy is real. Okay, I'm going to pretend. Well, here's a little thought experiment for you guys. If you thought there was a guy, a dude, an old white man with a beard in Western cultures, in the sky, always watching you, judging the moral value on every single one of your actions, and kind of keeping score, like Santa Claus, and doling you out punishments or rewards according to your behavior, let me ask you something. Would you be acting the same way that you're acting right now? I would say, especially the people that I know, because I'm in the addiction community mostly. All my friends are addicts. Like, we're all messed up. But I would just say no. You would be acting differently, okay? That gives a whole other meaning to doing the right thing when nobody else is looking. So there we go. If there was a God, and he was good, the God of the Christian Bible, how would he want me to act? I don't want you to get smart and be like, oh, he would want me to kill all the gay peoples because that's what it says in the book of whatever the hell. I'm just saying, if theoretically there was a God and he was good and he wanted you to be good, how would you act? Now, act that way. Not for a day, not for an hour, not for a week, not even for a month. Act that way for a year. Put your money where your mouth is and act appropriately in all your affairs whenever possible, doing your best to disregard your defective emotional impulses that are trying to take you off that beam all day, every day, steel yourself against it, conduct yourself in a godlike fashion. What would Jesus do? And see how good your life goes. Well, what we do here in AA is exactly that. We do the steps, we pray, we meditate, we try and remove our defects of character, we take responsibility for our actions, we repair the damage we've done to our fellows, and then we clean up our past, and now we keep our present clear by conducting ourselves in a noble and appropriate fashion. And if that gets you sober, there's some evidence. Now, how many people has AA got sober? Who the hell knows, man? Who the hell knows? Millions and millions and millions and millions. So for me, that's all the proof that I need. Especially considering how messed up I was and how desperate I was to change. I couldn't do anything properly. Everything that I ever did made my life worse, and I was trying as hard as I could to make everything go better. So you know what? I come into AA and a bunch of people tell me they were just like me and they did the steps and they believed in a power greater than themselves, and that belief helped them recreate their lives. I was super down with that. I'm on board. What do I have to do? You got to do the steps. You look at the steps, you go, fuck, if I do those things, does that mean I'm going to live a happily ever after? Doesn't really sound like it. When you read the steps on the board, it's like searching, and I don't know, doesn't sound like that would translate into me being a rich, famous person, but it actually does. You do the steps, the results that they promise you will happen. There's the proof, there's the evidence. I know that's not perfect proof, but that's all we got. Unfortunately, a big part of this program is kind of a leap of faith. That's all we have. There's no better recovery modality out so far. Maybe CBT is highly effective, which it is, and maybe if that's been given to every single drug addict and alcoholic, maybe you could say then the amount of people that have recovered through CBT will beat the amount of people in AA, but it's hard to get CBT. It's hard to get a doctor or a psychologist, a competent person to administer a proper CBT treatment for you that's not just you self-governing yourself, answering questions in a book and then changing the way that you think forever. Oh, I answered question 3, I'm no longer mentally ill. That shit does not work. In AA, you have millions of people around the globe that you can go to for help and sponsorship for free, readily available anywhere. So AA is the best recovery modality we have. It's not perfect. There's faults, there's flaws. You guys probably know that yourself. If you read the books, you could easily pick a bunch of shit apart. That's not the point. The point is that if it is the most successful recovery program we have, then that would mean that every single other thing other than it is worse. Why would you consciously do something worse? Because of this shit. Now let's continue proving these guys wrong. Okay? Now, one of the things that people say, why do bad things happen to good people? I could get into some examples of good people, especially innocent people, having had brutal things happen to them. I work in a treatment center with men. A lot of us have serious traumas based in a time of life where we cannot be, I don't know how to say it. People do fucked up shit to kids. It's not the kid's fault. Completely innocent. Now, whether kids are selfish or not, doesn't matter. That's inexcusable. Why? If there is such a thing as God and he loves us all, then why does he let this kind of shit happen? You know what? And there's no answer that will satisfy everybody to that question, but there's an answer that satisfied me because I notice this stuff just the same as you guys, right? We're not stupid. We notice these things. We choose our own conception of a higher power. I have my own. And in my conception, and you guys can agree or disagree, that's the beauty of all this, my higher power is not a human. And it doesn't have human feelings. And it's not like deciding it wants a baby to die of brain cancer. It's not deciding that. My idea of a higher power, I think a blade of grass is just as much a part of life as I am. I believe that an ant is just as much of a part of life as I am. I don't think my higher power makes value judgments on life. You know, if you're into thermodynamics or anything like that, you can be energy It cannot be created or destroyed. It can only be transferred from one form into another. And what I'm not talking about is the afterlife. I'm not talking about that I will die and it's okay because I'll reincarnate as an ant or a tree or a blade of grass. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is life is life. I don't believe that God values the lives of children more than it values the lives of grass. I do. I'm not saying that I think a blade of grass is the same moral value as a kid, because I'm a human and I want humans to succeed. And if someone tore down an entire rainforest, I would care less about that than if something bad happened to a baby. Myself personally, I'm a very human guy, and I appreciate humans, and I think we're awesome, and I think we do cool things and stuff like that. But, it's like God's not really concerned with that. God doesn't make judgments on what life is better than other life. Humans are the same as cats, dogs, ants, grass, plants. And that's what I personally think, and I actually believe that too. So, I know that if you've had something bad happen to you or someone that you love, it's going to be incredibly difficult for you to see things this way. And I'm not telling you have to do anything. And again, I'm not trying to be cheeky or smart about it or dismissive. But what I'm saying is, like, we're in the grips of a progressive illness that wants to kill us. And we need to change the way we think about life, or life will get us. Because our self-destruction mechanisms are on full bore, and we're killing ourselves at numbers unheard of. The number one killer of men aged 18 to 45 in North America is opiate overdose. Way more than the number one killer. So this is what we're up against. And I believe with every fiber of my being that this idea, this higher power, is a way out of all that. So we have to take it seriously. And I know that in the addiction community, there's lots of trauma and there's lots of brutality and just horrible, tragic stories that just make your heart pour. But all that being said, we need to do something to get over our addiction. And we need to do something drastic. And that answer is not going to be found recycling the same thoughts that you always have had throughout your whole life. We need to radically change our belief system. And that brings us to here, right? We can cancel that out and say we're doing this one now. Lots of us grew up in non-religious homes. Lots of us grew up with belief systems that don't lend themselves to the idea of a higher power. Lots of us have been anti-religious violently because of kind of an imposition on religious structure when we were children. Go to Bible school and the teachers, we don't like that kind of stuff. But the whole point of being here is that we've been living on a false belief system our entire life. What about the guy who thinks he's not good enough? What about the girl who thinks she's ugly and the guy who thinks he's stupid? And what if your parents were mean to you and they immigrated to Canada to give you a better life, and because of that they placed unnecessarily high expectations, and we moved from here so that you could have a better life, and they put all these expectations and you can't live up to them, and you grow up believing that you're a disappointment and everything you do is flavored by this idea that you're a disappointment. That's lots of people. What if your dad never got any validation from his dad because his dad was an alcoholic, and then he transfers that on to you, and he wants to be the dad and he wants to be the man, so he only tells you things that you can't do right, not things that you are doing right, and then you get angry with him because nothing you do is ever good enough for him, and you have a belief that you're just not good enough. You just can't do anything right. People live their entire lives by these faulty belief systems, and the addict and the alcoholic, or just people with mental illness in general, are characterized by their belief systems that drive their thoughts, actions, and behaviors for their whole life, and they're completely wrong. You guys aren't stupid. You're not ugly. You're not a piece of shit. You're not a failure. You are good enough. If you think these things about yourself, you are wrong. I know you're wrong. I've seen it a million times. And the sooner you can switch out your belief system for a more functional belief system, you're not going to stop using. That's just it. Okay, now, we're running out of time. Okay, no results, actually. I kept thinking I could erase some of these. Maybe I could erase this one. No results. That's a quick one. If you haven't experienced results yet, just keep going. That's it. You have to keep going. Not only do you have to pray, right? You have to pray for certain things. Your prayers will be answered if your requests bear on your usefulness to other people, right? And not in a way that televangelist guy used to tell people to give him money because he needed a bigger and better jet so he could fly to your city and pretend to heal you from blindness faster. I'm not talking about that kind of stuff. But if you want internal emotional stability, if you want peace and contentedness and freedom from the things, the chains that have bound you, because higher power will give you that in spades if you promise to use that stability as a platform to help your fellow man out of the gutter. I made a pact with my higher power at the beginning. I'm going to do all the things. I'm going to help people. I'm going to sponsor people. I'm going to be emotionally stable. I'm going to be balanced. I'm going to do this. But first, I am going to fix myself, and how I'm going to do that is by doing the steps. If you're real, do your part. Do all the things you need to do on your end. I am going right now to do all the things that I need to do on my end. And that means getting a sponsor, getting a home group, going through the steps, praying, meditating. And I did just that. And everything in my life configured itself to lay the red carpet, so to speak. And I've never looked back since. Okay? So I don't want you guys to reluctantly be like, okay, well, maybe I don't have a super good reason, but still, I want you guys to be excited about this. I want you to be happy about this. Man, if you do the things in the book, then all the stuff that you want to happen to you will happen to you given a period of time. Sometimes it's 1 year, sometimes it's 10 years. But you just do the things and you don't have to worry about everything else. Higher power, or the laws of nature, or whatever you want to call it, will just do the rest for you. It takes a lot of onus off you. It's less confusing. You don't have to figure out everything yourself. Am I going to meet that special someone? Am I going to have enough friends? Am I going to be financially successful? Am I ever going to own a property? Am I ever going to do this? Is everything going to be so hard and confusing for the rest of it? No, it's not. You do the things, and then all the things happen. So then you can kind of stride forward with some emotional stability and some singleness of purpose, and hopefully become convinced throughout the process that as long as you continue doing the things that you're doing, all the good things you want will eventually happen to you. So there is that. So if you guys aren't getting any results, keep going. Okay? Keep going. Last one. Evolution. Okay? And this is more a counter. This one's more of like a straw man. So people in AA, or people in recovery, or just people in general, when you say believe in a higher power, there's some things that they mention. One, Jesus probably didn't walk on water. That's not even real unless he had like those cool fucking jet things that we have now. They didn't resurrect him. He didn't die. And then they brought him back years later, 3 years later, 3 days later. I don't know what the thing is, but no one dies for 3 days and gets resurrected. People can be dead for some. I'm looking at Dylan here to try and I'm like, am I right about this? He doesn't know either. People can be dead for some period of time on fentanyl and then get Narcan, but they didn't have that back in the day, okay? But those Afghanis, they definitely had heroin back in the day. People often cite like, religious people believe dumb shit, essentially. Creationism, probably not true. Jesus walking on water, probably not true. And I consider myself pseudo-religious, and I actually like different religion and their belief systems and stuff like that. But I'm not on board with magic. I personally don't think magic is real. I don't think people float or levitate or turn water into wine. Or like multiply the bread, right? I think that's more of like a metaphor, like he made the best out of a bad situation. He could do a lot with very little. He multiplied the bread, got one seed and grew a whole crop, something like that. I believe there's like real life, everyday things that have happened. But one of the things is like the evolution thing. And for me, strong evidence that a higher power exists is actually in evolutionary theory. So usually people use evolution and science as a way to disprove the idea of a higher power. I'm more on the opposite way of thinking. In evolutionary theory, there's actually evidence that a higher power exists. And this is going to be a bit of a mind blinder for you guys, but try to stay with me and we'll get through it. So evolution is a weird one, okay? So Francis Crick and James Watson in like 1942 or 1946, they won a Nobel Prize for identifying how genes work. okay? And genes work in a really weird way because they work in the same way as digital software. And if you guys know anything about digital software, you got a 2-character code, 0s and 1s, that's binary, and all computer software and all video games and every digital thing on your TV is made of these 1s and 0s. So based on a 2-character code, you can create a lot of different stuff. And so, and almost like our alphabet. Our alphabet is a 26-character code, and with it, if you organize them in the right way, you can convey meaningful information, an infinite amount. Think of all the books that we have. You just get 26 characters, you arrange them in a specific way, and and it creates meaningful information. Genes work in the same way. And how genes work is a 4-character code: adenine, guanine, cytosine, and thymine. Those are called nucleotides. Those make up our DNA. Okay? So this 4-character code is the code that genes use to express themselves. Now, if you guys have ever seen like the picture of the gene and it's like that twisted up ladder, like that double helix formation, okay, those are genes. Those are snippets of genes. And if you uncurl the helix, it'll look something like this. And what happens is that these nucleotides, as they call, arrange themselves into base pairs. So it's like A, G, C, T, 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 A, C, G, randomly, right? And some of them are just random arrangements of letters, and some of them actually convey meaningful information. And what these do is, well, I'll tell you exactly what they do. So you have cells. Every cell in your body has a nucleus that contains between 3 and 6 billion base pairs of nucleotides. So your genes actually live in your cell, which is like every cell of your body has 6 billion base pairs of DNA living in there. And what they do is they clone themselves within the nucleus of the cell. So they take a half of it and it clones itself and branches off. So you got a half rung of a ladder. And that's called RNA, okay? DNA to RNA. Then what it does is it spits the RNA out into the cell. A, G, C, T. And this is every cell of your body. Your body is performing trillions and trillions of actions per second, okay? Then you got a little machine called a ribosome, and he comes in and he grabs the strand of RNA and it feeds it through itself. And so it goes, what's the first gene? A T? So then it grabs the thymine from your cell. And it grabs the corresponding amino acid from your cell. And then it goes to the next one. G, it grabs G. C, grabs C. A, grabs A. And eventually it builds little proteins, and little proteins then build the rest of you. Proteins give you eyelashes, toes, fingers, eyesight, everything. Everything is done by proteins. Genes code for protein machines that build your body. Now, here's a weird thing. Let's talk about Charles Darwin and natural selection. We all start from a single-celled organism, and that single-celled organism has a gene mutation, and that gene mutation it changes the organism, and it benefits the organism in relation to its environment. So what would happen? Let's just say I was like a bird, and I was a blackbird. And then there was a bunch of Goliath bird-eating spiders everywhere. And they're super good at seeing black, okay? And so all these black birds are getting picked off by these Goliath bird-eating spiders. Then all of a sudden, random gene mutation happens, and one of these birds is yellow. Super fluorescent yellow. And the Goliath bird-eating spiders can't see that color very well. What would happen is that bird would survive, it would mate, and if that bird mated, which it would because it would be alive, it would increase the likelihood that its offspring would be yellow. Let's just say it has 2 yellow offspring. Then those yellow offspring are not getting killed at nearly the same rate as all the other ones. So then they spread copies of their genes that also are more like, and then you give it 10,000 years or even less, all these birds are yellow now. But then the Goliath bird-eating spiders will be born with a random mutation that will allow it to see the color yellow, and then all the yellow ones will start, and then that's how species co-evolve. But natural selection is how evolution works. Charles Darwin didn't invent evolution. He came up with the idea of natural selection, which is the mechanism that evolution uses to work. Okay? So random gene mutation and selection by the environment. Now there's a scientist named Stephen Meyer who went, that's weird. How can one random gene mutation happening every once in a while take us from a little single-celled organism all the way to a human, right? A random gene mutation. Like, what are the chances that even a random gene mutation would be a good thing instead of a bad thing? It would seem like the overwhelming odds would be any gene mutates within me and it would make me worse and not better, right? It wouldn't turn me into an X-Men. I would be born without a finger or something. Like, it's not. And so he actually decided to be like, oh, that's really weird. Let's figure that question out. How many gene mutations would have to happen for one to even be good? And like, that's a good question, because imagine if what if I got GTA 5 and I opened it up into the source code, all the zeros and ones, all the billions of zeros and ones that make out the game, and I just started deleting some and adding in others. Delete all the zeros here, add in some ones over here, and I just completely randomized, put in a bunch of zeros and ones. What are the chances that I wouldn't ruin the game? Extremely low. Now, what are the chances that I would not ruin the game and add something new to the game? Kind of weird, not very unlikely. What are the chances that I would add a whole new playable feature in the game that made the game so much better that everyone now actually bought it? Really, really low. These numbers are starting to be astronomical. So there's a guy named Douglas Axe, he's a researcher out of Caltech, who decided to find this number. And what he found is that one gene mutation to every 10 to the power of 77 would go bad. That's a bit weird. So if you guys didn't know, there's only 10 to the 65th atoms in the Milky Way galaxy. So this number is astronomical. What that would mean is that if we started from a single-celled organism and this was the rate of gene mutation, we wouldn't even be able to escape that simple organism. And this is a problem that's a combinatorial explosion problem. One gene mutation going good to every 10 to the power of 77 going bad would make the amount of diversity we have in life impossible. There wouldn't even be able to be one species, let alone humans and dogs and plants and all that stuff. So, there's some missing links in the evolutionary chain. Like when humans became conscious, where's the link there? Flowering plants, no link there. Insects with wings, there's a big gap in the fossil record there. So there's a bunch of missing gaps in the fossil record. And he was like, this is insane. How could this much amount of genetic information being generated over such a short period of time? Because the numbers just don't add up. In order to create a human or a dog or any complex life, the world would have to be billions and billions and billions and billions and billions and trillions of years older than it is now. So the numbers don't add up. So what Stephen Meyer was concerned with is like, okay, well, is there any other instance of a tremendous amount of genetic information being generated in such a short period of time that we can kind of use to apply to our situation? And what he found was the only time a vast quantity of genetic information was generated over a short period of time is when there was something involved. And what that something is intelligence. So intelligence is the only thing that's known to produce rapid changes in genetic information. Look what we did to gray wolves. We turned them into every single dog species known to man. Look what we can do, anything we want to birds now. We can do anything we want to flowers. We're making all these subspecies, genetically modified organisms. We can interfere with the process of natural selection almost at will whenever we want to produce all sorts of changes. So, and then that's an interesting thing. So then what was responsible for creating such a rapid amount of genetic information before humans were tampering with gray wolves? And it's like, we don't know. And then you got to ask yourselves, if humans are intelligent, is there a possibility that intelligence exists outside of humans? And it's like, for me, it's yes. God, something like a higher power being real is like the same odds to me as aliens being real. It's impossible for it not to be real, whatever it is. Like it could be extremely overweight, obese gentleman living in his parents' basement, creating a simulation that we all live in, simulation theory. And the weird part is, like, I don't find many people that have a problem with that. Like, all the guys in my class, like, yeah, simulation, we live in a simulation. Like, Elon Musk smoked a joint on Joe Rogan podcast, and now I know that we live in a simulation. It's like, well, who created the simulation? It's like, wouldn't that be higher power? No. And again, with the obstinacy, unreasoning prejudice, cultural indoctrination, people just are against this idea emotionally, and that emotion generates thoughts and resistance to the idea that is unfounded and all that.